In a small, quiet town where life moved at a predictable pace, an unexpected incident shook the community to its core. Sarah Thompson, a well-respected human rights advocate and the newly elected president of the local Human Rights Council, was known for her tireless efforts in fighting discrimination and promoting equality. For years, she had stood up for the voiceless, challenging systems that oppressed marginalized groups. Her work earned her admiration from many, but it also made her a target for those who opposed change. Sarah's day started like any other. She woke up early, drank her coffee while reviewing notes for an upcoming council meeting, and headed out to spend the afternoon discussing strategies to combat racial profiling in law enforcement. The meeting ran late into the evening, and by the time Sarah left the building, the streets were empty except for the soft hum of distant traffic. The air was cool, and the dim glow of streetlights cast long shadows on the pavement. It was supposed to be just another ordinary night. As Sarah walked toward her car, parked a block away, she noticed two police officers standing near their patrol vehicle. They were casually chatting, their uniforms crisp under the yellowish light. At first, Sarah didn't think much of it. Police presence wasn't uncommon in this part of town. But as she passed by, one of the officers suddenly called out to her. "Hey, you! Stop right there!" he barked, his tone sharp and commanding. Sarah froze, confused. She turned around slowly, holding her bag close to her chest. "Is something wrong, officer?" she asked politely, her voice steady despite the sudden tension in the air. The officer approached her, his partner trailing behind him. "We're looking for someone," he said gruffly, eyeing her suspiciously. "You fit the description." Sarah frowned, taken aback. "What description?" she asked calmly. "I'm just heading home after a meeting. I can show you my ID if that helps." She reached into her bag to pull out her wallet, but the officer stepped closer, his hand resting conspicuously on the holster of his gun. "Don't make any sudden moves," he warned, his voice laced with hostility. His partner remained silent, watching the exchange unfold without saying a word. Sarah handed over her identification card, explaining who she was and why she was in the area. "I'm Sarah Thompson," she said firmly. "I'm the president of the Human Rights Council. You can verify my identity if you need to." But instead of calming down, the officer grew angrier. He sneered at her, his gaze narrowing. "Oh, so you're one of those people, huh? Always talking about rights this and rights that." His tone dripped with sarcasm, and Sarah immediately sensed something was off. This wasn't a routine stop. It felt personal. The officer began asking intrusive questions, clearly trying to intimidate her, when Sarah responded with calm reasoning, pointing out that stopping her without probable cause violated her civil liberties. The situation took a darker turn. The officer's face reddened, and he grabbed her arm roughly, pulling her closer. "You think you're smart, don't you?" he spat, "talking back to me like that." His partner finally spoke up, though not to defend Sarah. "Come on, let's just take her in," he muttered, glancing around nervously. It was clear they were escalating things unnecessarily, perhaps hoping to scare her into submission. But Sarah refused to be intimidated. Though her heart raced and fear gripped her, she stood her ground. "This is unlawful," she said, her voice trembling slightly but still strong. "You have no reason to detain me. If you continue this way, I will record everything." With that, she pulled out her phone and began filming the encounter. The primary officer reacted violently, shoving her against the side of the patrol car. "Put that thing away," he shouted, drawing his gun and pointing it directly at her chest. Sarah gasped, her knees buckling momentarily as terror washed over her. But even then, she managed to keep recording, knowing that evidence might be the only thing that could save her. "Do you know who I am?" The officer snarled, his finger hovering dangerously close to the trigger. "You're nothing. People like you always think you're better than us, but we're the ones keeping this town safe." Sarah swallowed hard, forcing herself to stay composed. "Officer, please lower your weapon," she pleaded, her eyes locked onto his. "This isn't necessary. I haven't done anything wrong." For what felt like an eternity, the officer kept the gun trained on her, his breathing heavy and erratic. Passers-by began to notice the commotion, stopping to watch or film the scene themselves. A crowd started forming, murmuring among themselves about what they were witnessing. Some shouted encouragements to Sarah, urging her to stay brave, while others criticized the officers for their aggressive behavior. Finally, after what seemed like forever, the officer holstered his weapon and stepped back, though his expression remained hostile. "Get out of here," he growled, waving her away dismissively. "And don't let me catch you around here again." Shaken but determined, Sarah gathered her belongings and walked briskly to her car, her legs feeling weak beneath her. As soon as she got inside, she locked the doors and sat trembling, replaying the horrifying events in her mind. She knew she couldn't stay silent. Not about this. What had happened wasn't just an isolated incident. It was symptomatic of larger issues within the system, and Sarah was determined to expose it. That night, unable to sleep, Sarah uploaded the video of the encounter to social media. In a brief caption, she described what had happened and urged others to share the footage. Within hours, the video went viral, sparking outrage across the country. Viewers flooded comment sections with messages of support for Sarah, calling for accountability and justice. Local activists organized protests outside the police station, demanding answers and reforms. Journalists reached out to Sarah for interviews, eager to hear her story firsthand. As the days passed, Sarah found herself thrust into the spotlight, her name becoming synonymous with resistance against police brutality and systemic racism. Though the attention brought her strength, it also came with risks. Threats poured in from anonymous accounts, warning her to drop the issue or face consequences. Despite the danger, Sarah refused to back down. She knew that staying silent would mean letting injustice prevail, and that was something she simply couldn't accept. Little did she know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would test her resolve, challenge societal norms, and ultimately inspire thousands to join her fight for a fairer, more equitable world. The video of Sarah Thompson's encounter with the two police officers spread like wildfire. Within hours, it was everywhere: social media platforms, news websites, and even late-night talk shows. People couldn't stop talking about it. The footage showed the raw reality of what had happened. An unarmed woman, a respected human rights advocate, being threatened with a gun by someone sworn to protect her. Viewers were outraged, horrified, and deeply moved. For many, Sarah's story wasn't just about one terrifying night. It was a reflection of broader issues plaguing society. As the video gained traction, hashtags like Justice for Sarah and End Police Brutality began trending on social media. Thousands of people shared their own stories of mistreatment at the hands of law enforcement, creating a tidal wave of voices demanding change. Protesters gathered outside the police station in Sarah's town, holding signs that read "Accountability now" and "No justice, no peace." Some chanted her name, turning her into a symbol of resistance against systemic racism and abuse of power. Sarah watched all of this unfold from her home, still processing the events of that night. She hadn't expected such a massive response. Initially, she had posted the video simply to ensure there was evidence if anything worse happened to her. But now, she realized the magnitude of what she had started. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about everyone who had ever felt powerless in the face of injustice. Despite the overwhelming support, Sarah knew she needed to act quickly. The next morning, she filed a formal complaint with the police department's Internal Affairs Division. She provided them with a detailed account of the incident, along with screenshots of threatening messages she'd received online since posting the video. Her lawyer, a seasoned civil rights attorney named Marcus Reed, accompanied her to the meeting. Together, they emphasized the urgency of the situation, pointing out that the officers involved posed a clear danger, not only to Sarah, but to the entire community. Marcus assured Sarah that he would do everything in his power to hold the officers accountable. "This isn't just about punishing them," he explained during their drive back from the police station. "It's about sending a message that no one is above the law, not even those tasked with enforcing it." Meanwhile, public pressure continued to mount. Local news outlets covered the protests extensively, airing interviews with residents who expressed anger and frustration over years of unchecked misconduct within the police force. One woman tearfully recounted how her son had been wrongfully arrested after being racially profiled. Another man described how officers had broken into his home without a warrant, destroying property and traumatizing his family. These stories added fuel to the fire, amplifying calls for reform. In response to the growing outcry, the police chief held a press conference. Standing behind a podium flanked by American flags, he attempted to reassure the public that the department took allegations of misconduct seriously. "We are aware of the recent incident involving Ms. Thompson, and we are conducting a thorough investigation," he said, reading from a prepared statement. "If wrongdoing is found, appropriate action will be taken." But his words did little to quell the unrest. Protesters booed loudly when clips of the press conference aired on live television. Many accused the police department of protecting its own, pointing out that similar promises had been made in the past only for nothing to change. Trust between the community and law enforcement had eroded so severely that empty reassurances no longer carried weight. Back at her office, Sarah worked tirelessly alongside other activists to keep the momentum going. They organized rallies, distributed flyers, and reached out to influential figures who could amplify their message. Sarah also appeared on several national news programs, speaking passionately about the need for systemic reform. During one interview, she addressed critics who argued that she should have complied with the officers instead of filming them. "I understand why some people might think I should have stayed quiet," she said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "But silence doesn't solve problems, it perpetuates them. When you see something wrong, you have a responsibility to speak up. That's how progress happens." Her words resonated with viewers across the country, inspiring countless others to join the movement. High school students staged walkouts in solidarity, chanting slogans as they marched through their campuses. College professors incorporated discussions of police accountability into their lectures, encouraging students to think critically about institutional power dynamics. Even celebrities used their platforms to raise awareness, sharing Sarah's story with millions of followers. Amidst the chaos, tensions escalated between protesters and pro-police groups. Counter-demonstrations erupted sporadically, with both sides clashing over differing views about law enforcement. Some supporters of the police claimed that officers were being unfairly targeted and vilified, while others dismissed accusations of systemic racism as exaggerated or baseless. These divisions created a volatile atmosphere, with emotions running high on all sides. One particularly tense evening, Sarah attended a rally near the courthouse where hundreds of demonstrators had gathered. As she stepped onto the makeshift stage, cheers erupted from the crowd. Holding a microphone in one hand and gripping the edge of the podium with the other, she looked out at the sea of faces illuminated by flickering candlelight. "I want to thank each and every one of you for standing here tonight," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "What happened to me wasn't an isolated event. It was a symptom of a much bigger problem. But together we can create change." She went on to outline specific steps the community could take to push for reform, including lobbying local lawmakers, supporting grassroots organizations, and educating themselves about their rights. By the time she finished speaking, tears streamed down her face, but so did determination. The crowd erupted into applause, energized by her words. However, not everyone welcomed Sarah's activism with open arms. Anonymous threats continued to pour in, ranging from hateful messages to ominous warnings claiming she would regret challenging authority. At times, Sarah felt overwhelmed, questioning whether she had bitten off more than she could chew. Yet, whenever doubt crept in, she reminded herself of the countless individuals counting on her to fight for justice. To cope with the stress, Sarah leaned heavily on her support network. Friends checked in regularly, offering words of encouragement and helping her navigate the whirlwind of attention. Colleagues at the Human Rights Council pitched in wherever possible, ensuring that day-to-day operations ran smoothly despite her busy schedule. And then there was Marcus, whose unwavering dedication kept her grounded during moments of uncertainty. Behind closed doors, The investigation into the officers involved progressed steadily. Evidence surfaced linking them to previous incidents of misconduct, including falsified reports and excessive use of force. Internal affairs investigators reviewed body camera footage from unrelated cases, uncovering disturbing patterns of behavior that painted a grim picture of unchecked authority gone awry. Meanwhile, prosecutors reviewed Sarah's case, weighing the possibility of filing criminal charges against the officers. As weeks turned into months, anticipation grew palpable. Would justice finally be served? Or would the system once again shield those responsible for perpetuating harm? For Sarah and countless others watching closely, the outcome of this case carried profound implications, not just for her town but for communities nationwide grappling with similar struggles. And though the road ahead remained uncertain, one thing was clear: Sarah Thompson had ignited a spark that refused to fade. Through her courage and resilience, she had transformed a harrowing personal experience into a catalyst for collective action, a beacon of hope shining brightly amidst darkness. The investigation into the officers involved in Sarah Thompson's case continued to unfold, drawing widespread attention not only locally, but also across the nation. As evidence mounted against them, the pressure on law enforcement officials intensified. Internal affairs investigators worked tirelessly, reviewing years of records, body camera footage, and witness testimonies that painted a troubling picture of misconduct and abuse of power. The two officers at the center of the controversy, Officer Mark Harris and his partner, Officer Daniel Reyes, were placed on administrative leave pending further review. But for many, this wasn't enough. Sarah remained steadfast in her pursuit of accountability, attending every hearing and meeting related to the case. She sat quietly in courtrooms, her presence a constant reminder of the stakes involved. Her resolve inspired others to come forward with their own stories of mistreatment by these same officers. One woman recounted how Officer Harris had pulled her over without cause, citing vague descriptions that didn't match her appearance. Another man shared how Officer Reyes had used excessive force during an arrest, leaving him with injuries that required hospitalization. These accounts added layers of complexity to the case, reinforcing the need for systemic change. Meanwhile, public demonstrations showed no signs of slowing down. Protesters gathered daily outside the police station, chanting slogans and holding banners demanding justice. Some activists organized teach-ins, educating attendees about their rights when interacting with law enforcement. Others hosted fundraisers to support legal efforts and provide resources for victims of police brutality. The movement gained momentum as more people joined the cause, united by a shared desire for reform. Amidst the growing unrest, tensions between pro-police factions and protesters escalated. Counter-demonstrations erupted sporadically, with both sides exchanging heated arguments and, at times, physical altercations. Supporters of law enforcement argued that officers were being unfairly targeted and vilified, while critics countered that accountability was long overdue. The divide deepened, creating a volatile atmosphere where emotions ran high. One evening, Sarah found herself caught in the middle of one such confrontation. She had gone to deliver a speech at a community forum when she noticed a group of counter-protesters gathering nearby. Their chants grew louder, drowning out the voices of those advocating for reform. Frustration simmered among the crowd, and it seemed like things might spiral out of control. Determined to maintain peace, Sarah stepped onto the makeshift stage and addressed the audience. "I understand there are differing opinions here tonight," she began, her voice calm but firm. "But shouting over each other won't solve anything. We need dialogue, not division." Her words struck a chord with some, prompting a few individuals from both sides to lower their placards and listen. Slowly, the noise subsided, replaced by an uneasy silence. Seizing the moment, Sarah encouraged everyone to engage in constructive conversations rather than resorting to hostility. While not all participants agreed with her approach, many appreciated her effort to foster understanding. Back home, Sarah reflected on the challenges ahead. Despite the progress made so far, she knew the fight was far from over. Criminal charges still needed to be filed against the officers, and even then, convictions were never guaranteed. Moreover, addressing Systemic issues within law enforcement required sustained effort beyond individual cases. It meant implementing policies that promoted transparency, accountability, and cultural sensitivity. To tackle these broader goals, Sarah collaborated with fellow activists to draft a comprehensive reform proposal. They outlined specific measures, such as mandating body cameras for all officers, establishing independent oversight boards, and revamping training programs to emphasize de-escalation tactics and empathy. Additionally, they advocated reallocating funds from traditional policing methods to community-based initiatives aimed at reducing crime through education and social services. Their efforts bore fruit when local lawmakers agreed to consider the proposals. City council meetings became packed with residents eager to voice their opinions on potential reforms. Testimonies poured in from various stakeholders, teachers, healthcare workers, business owners, all sharing insights on how improved policing practices could benefit society as a whole. The discussions were intense but productive, signaling a shift toward meaningful action. During this time, Sarah received unexpected support from unlikely allies. A retired police captain named James Carter reached out to express solidarity with her cause. Having served 3 decades in law enforcement, he understood firsthand the flaws embedded within the system. In interviews alongside Sarah, Captain Carter emphasized the importance of holding bad actors accountable while protecting honest officers committed to serving their communities. His involvement lent credibility to the movement, swaying skeptics who initially dismissed calls for reform as anti-police rhetoric. As weeks turned into months, anticipation built around the district attorney's decision regarding criminal charges against officers Harris and Reyes. Rumors circulated about what charges might be filed, ranging from misdemeanor offenses to felonies carrying significant prison sentences. Legal experts debated the merits of each possibility, analyzing precedents set by similar cases nationwide. Meanwhile, Sarah prepared herself for whatever outcome awaited. Finally, the day arrived. Standing before a packed courtroom, the district attorney announced the indictment of both officers on multiple counts, including assault with a deadly weapon, violation of civil rights, and obstruction of justice. Gasps filled the room as reporters scrambled to capture the historic moment. Outside, news vans lined the streets, broadcasting live updates to anxious viewers eagerly awaiting developments. For Sarah, the announcement brought a mix of relief and vindication. After months of uncertainty, justice finally seemed within reach. Yet she remained cautious, aware that trials often dragged on for years before reaching conclusions. Still, the indictment marked a crucial milestone, a rare instance where law enforcement faced serious consequences for abusing power. News of the indictment sparked celebrations across the country. Supporters cheered loudly, hugging one another, as tears streamed down their faces. Hashtags like Tsar's accountability wins trended online, accompanied by messages of gratitude directed at Sarah and her team. Critics, however, accused prosecutors of bowing to public pressure, arguing that the officers deserved fair treatment despite their alleged misconduct. Debates raged on social media, reflecting the polarized nature of the issue. Despite mixed reactions, one undeniable truth emerged. Sarah's ordeal had galvanized a movement capable of challenging entrenched norms head-on. What started as a terrifying encounter had evolved into a catalyst propelling monumental shifts in societal attitudes toward policing and accountability. Inspired by her courage, countless individuals vowed to continue pushing for change, recognizing that true transformation required persistence and unity. In the weeks following the indictment, Sarah returned to her role leading the Human Rights Council, now infused with renewed purpose. She traveled extensively, delivering speeches and participating in panel discussions focused on dismantling oppressive systems, perpetuating inequality, generation after generation. Through grassroots organizing and strategic advocacy, she championed causes transcending borders, uniting diverse voices striving toward shared goals rooted in dignity and fairness. Though scars lingered emotionally, resilience defined her journey. Moving forward, a testament to courage transforming tragedy into transformative change capable of reshaping society fundamentally. And so, Sarah stood tall, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing full well that the road to justice was paved with perseverance, sacrifice, and unwavering hope. The indictment of officers Mark Harris and Daniel Reyes sent shockwaves through the small town and beyond, igniting debates that stretched far beyond local boundaries. For many, it was a historic moment, a rare instance where law enforcement officers faced serious criminal charges for misconduct. The announcement dominated headlines, with news outlets dissecting every detail of the case. Legal analysts weighed in on the potential outcomes, while community members grappled with what this meant for their town's future. Amidst all the noise, Sarah Thompson remained focused, knowing that the real battle was just beginning. As preparations for the trial began, tensions simmered in the community. Supporters of the officers argued that they were being made scapegoats in a politically charged climate. "They're not perfect, but they're human beings trying to do a tough job," one resident said during a heated town hall meeting. Others countered that accountability wasn't about punishing individuals. It was about addressing systemic failures that allowed such behavior to go unchecked for years. "If we don't hold them accountable now," an activist retorted, "then when will we?" Sarah understood both perspectives, but she refused to let fear or backlash deter her from seeking justice. She spent countless hours working with her legal team, reviewing evidence, and preparing for testimony. Prosecutor Lisa Monroe, known for her no-nonsense approach to civil rights cases, led the case against the officers. Together, they meticulously pieced together a narrative that highlighted not only the events of that fateful night, but also the broader pattern of misconduct linked to Harris and Reyes. Behind closed doors, however, the emotional toll weighed heavily on Sarah. Nights were often sleepless, haunted by memories of the gun pointed at her chest and the venomous words spat by Officer Harris. Friends noticed how thin she'd grown, her once vibrant energy replaced by quiet determination. Yet, whenever doubt crept in, she reminded herself of the countless people counting on her, not just those directly affected by police brutality, but everyone who believed in the possibility of a fairer world. To cope, Sarah leaned on her support network more than ever before. Her close friend and fellow advocate, Rachel Kim, accompanied her to meetings and court appearances, offering comfort when things felt overwhelming. Marcus Reed, her lawyer, provided steady guidance, reminding her that her courage had already sparked change regardless of the trial's outcome. Even strangers reached out with messages of encouragement, sharing stories of how her bravery inspired them to stand up against injustice in their own lives. Meanwhile, the trial loomed large over the town. Court dates were set, witnesses were summoned, and attorneys prepared their arguments. Prosecutors planned to present a mountain of evidence, including body camera footage from unrelated incidents involving Harris and Reyes, internal affairs, reports detailing previous complaints, and expert testimonies on the psychological impact of racial profiling and excessive force. Defense lawyers, on the other hand, aimed to cast doubt on the credibility of the accusations, arguing that the officers acted under immense pressure and within the bounds of their duties. On the first day of the trial, the courtroom buzzed with anticipation. Reporters jostled for seats, cameras flashing as Sarah entered alongside her legal team. Dressed simply yet elegantly, she carried herself with quiet dignity, her eyes scanning the room briefly before taking her seat. Officers Harris and Reyes sat stoically beside their defense attorneys, their expressions unreadable. As the judge called the proceedings to order, a hush fell over the crowd. Prosecutor Lisa Monroe delivered a compelling opening statement, painting a vivid picture of the abuse of power and systemic racism embedded in policing practices. "This case is not just about two officers," she declared, her voice firm and unwavering. "It's about holding institutions accountable for perpetuating harm against marginalized communities. Justice demands nothing less." Defense counsel countered by emphasizing the challenges faced by law enforcement officers daily. "These men put their lives on the line to protect us," he argued passionately. "Yes, mistakes may have been made, but does that warrant throwing away careers? Does it justify ruining families?" As testimonies unfolded, the courtroom became a battleground of conflicting narratives. Witnesses recounted harrowing experiences with Harris and Reyes, describing instances of intimidation, violence, and blatant disregard for civil liberties. One elderly woman broke down in tears as she described how Officer Harris had handcuffed her teenage grandson during a routine traffic stop, accusing him of theft based solely on his race. Another witness, a former colleague of the officer's, hesitated before admitting to witnessing similar patterns of behavior throughout his career. Sarah took the stand near the end of the prosecution's case. Under oath, she recounted the events of that terrifying night, her voice steady despite the weight of reliving the trauma. When asked why she chose to record the encounter, she responded with conviction. "Because I knew my life mattered. Because I knew silence would only embolden those who seek to oppress others." Her testimony resonated deeply with jurors, some of whom wiped away tears as she spoke. Cross-examination proved grueling, with defense attorneys attempting to undermine her credibility by questioning her motives and suggesting she provoked the confrontation. But Sarah held her ground, refusing to be shaken. Throughout the trial, public interest remained sky-high. Protesters gathered outside the courthouse daily, holding signs and chanting slogans demanding accountability. Counter-protesters occasionally showed up, leading to tense standoffs that required police intervention. Inside the courtroom, emotions ran high as each side presented its closing arguments. Prosecutor Monroe urged the jury to consider the bigger picture, framing the verdict as an opportunity to send a message that no one was above the law. Defense counsel implored them to look past public opinion and focus solely on the facts presented. After weeks of deliberation, the jury finally reached a decision. On the morning of the verdict, the courtroom overflowed with spectators eager to hear the outcome. As the foreperson read the guilty verdicts aloud, assault with a deadly weapon, violation of civil rights, obstruction of justice, a collective gasp rippled through the room. Cheers erupted outside, where supporters celebrated the monumental win. For Sarah, relief washed over her like a tidal wave. Tears streamed down her face as she embraced her legal team, overwhelmed by the realization that justice had prevailed, at least for now. But even as celebrations unfolded, Sarah recognized that this victory was only part of a larger struggle. True reform required sustained effort, not just symbolic gestures. Inspired by the momentum, she redoubled her commitment to advocacy, traveling across the country to share her story and mobilize grassroots movements. Workshops teaching bystander intervention techniques sprang up in cities nationwide, empowering ordinary citizens to challenge injustice wherever they encountered it. In the wake of the trial, lawmakers introduced sweeping reforms aimed at addressing systemic issues within law enforcement. Bills mandating stricter oversight protocols, requiring body cameras, and reallocating resources toward community-based initiatives gained traction. Public forums brought together diverse voices, fostering dialogue about how best to build trust between police and the communities they served. For Sarah, the journey ahead remained daunting, but she faced it with renewed hope. What had started as a terrifying encounter had evolved into a movement capable of challenging entrenched norms head-on. Through resilience and solidarity, she proved unequivocally that no obstacle loomed insurmountable when fueled by unwavering determination coupled with unyielding unity. And so, Sarah stood tall, ready to continue fighting for a world where dignity and fairness reigned supreme, a testament to the transformative power of courage in the face of adversity. The guilty verdict against Officers Mark Harris and Daniel Reyes marked a turning point, not just for Sarah Thompson, but for the entire nation. It was a rare moment where accountability triumphed over impunity, sending a powerful message that even those sworn to uphold the law could be held responsible when they crossed ethical boundaries. For Sarah, it felt like vindication, a validation of her courage in standing up against injustice, despite the risks. Yet, as she stood outside, the courthouse amidst cheers and applause from supporters, she knew this victory wasn't the end of the road. If anything, it was the beginning of a much larger battle. In the days following the trial, Sarah became a household name. Her story appeared on magazine covers, late-night talk shows, and major news networks. Journalists hailed her as a symbol of resilience and determination, someone who had transformed personal trauma into a catalyst for change. But Sarah didn't revel in the attention. Instead, she used her platform wisely. She traveled across the country speaking at universities, community centers, and town halls about the importance of systemic reform. Each speech carried the same core message. This isn't about me. This is about all of us, about creating a world where everyone feels safe, respected, and valued. Her advocacy work took on new dimensions after the trial. Alongside fellow activists, Sarah launched an initiative called Justice Beyond Borders, aimed at addressing police misconduct nationwide. The program focused on 3 key areas: education, policy reform, and grassroots mobilization. Workshops were organized to teach citizens how to document interactions with law enforcement safely, while legal clinics provided free resources for victims of abuse seeking justice. At the same time, Sarah worked tirelessly to push legislators to adopt comprehensive reforms, including mandatory de-escalation training for officers, independent oversight boards, and transparency measures like public access to disciplinary records. One of Sarah's most impactful projects involved partnering with technology companies to develop tools for accountability. A mobile app called Rights Watch allowed users to record encounters with police and automatically upload them to secure servers, ensuring evidence couldn't be tampered with or deleted. The app also included educational materials detailing individuals' rights during stops and arrests, empowering people to assert themselves without escalating situations unnecessarily. Within months of its launch, Rights Watch gained millions of downloads, becoming a lifeline for marginalized communities navigating fraught relationships with law enforcement. As momentum grew, so did resistance. Critics argued that initiatives, like Rights Watch, undermined trust between police and civilians, claiming they encouraged hostility toward officers simply doing their jobs. Some police unions lobbied aggressively against proposed reforms, framing them as attacks on law enforcement rather than efforts to improve it. Pro-police rallies popped up in various cities, drawing crowds chanting slogans like "Blue Lives Matter" and "Back the Badge." Tensions flared once again, threatening to derail progress, but Sarah refused to let divisiveness define the movement. Instead, she doubled down on fostering dialogue between opposing sides. In one particularly memorable event, she invited retired police captain James Carter to co-host a national summit on policing reform. Together, they facilitated discussions between officers, activists, academics, and community leaders, encouraging participants to find common ground. Captain Carter emphasized the importance of supporting good cops while rooting out bad ones, while Sarah highlighted the urgent need for systemic changes to prevent abuses of power. By the end of the summit, attendees had drafted a set of recommendations that balanced accountability with respect for law enforcement, a testament to what collaboration could achieve. Despite these strides, challenges persisted. Threats against Sarah escalated after the trial, forcing her to hire security detail and install surveillance cameras around her home. Anonymous messages flooded her inbox, some calling her names, others vowing revenge. One night, someone spray-painted hateful graffiti on the walls of her office building. Though shaken, Sarah refused to let fear dictate her actions. "They can try to intimidate me," she told friends, "but they can't silence me. Not now, not ever." Her resolve inspired countless others to join the fight. Young activists, many of whom had grown disillusioned by years of unfulfilled promises, found renewed hope in Sarah's example. High school students organized walkouts demanding curriculum changes to include lessons on civil rights history. College campuses buzzed with energy as student groups staged protests and hosted panels featuring experts on racial justice. Social media campaigns amplified voices often ignored by mainstream narratives, ensuring that diverse perspectives remained central to the conversation. Meanwhile, legislative victories began stacking up. Lawmakers introduced bills addressing issues ranging from qualified immunity, the legal doctrine shielding officers from lawsuits, to funding allocations for mental health services and restorative justice programs. Several states passed laws mandating body cameras for all officers, while others established civilian review boards with subpoena power to investigate misconduct allegations. These successes weren't achieved overnight. They required relentless lobbying, coalition building, and public pressure. But each win brought the movement closer to its ultimate goal. Yet, perhaps the most profound impact of Sarah's journey was the shift in public consciousness. Conversations about policing and race, once relegated to activist circles, entered living rooms and classrooms across America. Parents taught their children about privilege and bias. Teachers incorporated discussions of systemic racism into lesson plans. Neighbors engaged in difficult but necessary dialogues about inequality and justice. Slowly but surely, societal attitudes began to evolve, not because of any single person's efforts, but because of collective action, fueled by shared purpose. For Sarah, this transformation was deeply personal. She thought back to the night she was threatened with a gun, recalling the terror that gripped her as Officer Harris sneered in her face. That moment had changed her forever, forcing her to confront the harsh realities faced daily by so many others. Yet, it had also revealed something extraordinary: the strength of the human spirit when united in pursuit of a better future. Every protester holding a sign, every legislator voting for reform, every individual downloading Rights Watch, they were all part of a tapestry woven together by courage, empathy, and hope. Still, Sarah understood that true change required vigilance. As headlines faded and public attention shifted elsewhere, she reminded herself and others that the work was far from done. Systemic racism and abuse of power wouldn't disappear overnight. Undoing centuries of harm demanded sustained effort and unwavering commitment. With that in mind, she continued pushing forward, undeterred by setbacks or fatigue. By the end of the year, Sarah's influence extended beyond national borders. International organizations invited her to speak at conferences on human rights and social justice. Activists abroad adapted her strategies to fit their own contexts, proving that the principles of accountability and equity transcended cultural differences. What started as a local struggle had blossomed into a global movement, inspiring countless individuals to challenge oppressive systems wherever they existed. Through it all, Sarah remained grounded, drawing strength from the community that supported her and the cause she believed in. She often reflected on how far she'd come, from a quiet advocate working behind the scenes to a national figurehead leading a revolution. But more than anything, she cherished the connections forged along the way. Friendships born out of shared struggles, partnerships built on mutual trust, and moments of solidarity that reminded her why she kept fighting. And so, as another year drew to a close, Sarah stood ready to face whatever lay ahead. Challenges would arise, obstacles would test her resolve, and critics would attempt to discredit her work. But none of that mattered. Not when she remembered the faces of those counting on her, the stories of those who had suffered silently for too long, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow worth striving for. With every step forward, she proved that courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was the decision to act despite it. And in doing so, she showed the world that even the smallest spark could ignite a fire capable of transforming society fundamentally. Months turned into years, and Sarah Thompson's journey continued to inspire millions around the globe. The guilty verdict against officers Mark Harris and Daniel Reyes had been a pivotal moment, but it was only the beginning of a much larger transformation. One that reshaped not just her town, but entire communities grappling with systemic injustice. As time passed, Sarah's relentless pursuit of equality became synonymous with hope, resilience, and the belief that change was possible, even in the face of overwhelming odds. The reforms sparked by her case gained traction nationwide. States adopted sweeping legislation aimed at increasing transparency within law enforcement agencies. Body cameras became mandatory for all officers, and policies were implemented requiring footage from critical incidents to be released publicly within 72 hours. Independent oversight boards gained real power, equipped with subpoena authority to investigate misconduct allegations without interference from police unions or internal affairs departments. These measures didn't eliminate abuses entirely, but they created accountability structures that made bad actors think twice before abusing their authority. At the federal level, lawmakers introduced landmark bills addressing qualified immunity, the legal shield long criticized for protecting officers accused of wrongdoing. After months of heated debates, Congress passed the Justice Accountability Act, which redefined when officers could claim immunity and opened avenues for victims to seek damages through civil lawsuits. President-elect Michelle Alvarez signed the bill into law during a ceremony attended by Sarah and other activists who had championed the cause. Standing on the White House lawn, surrounded by cheering supporters, Sarah felt a surge of pride knowing that her efforts had contributed to such monumental progress. But legislative victories weren't the only signs of change. Grassroots movements, inspired by Sarah's story, flourished across the country, mobilizing ordinary citizens to demand justice in their own neighborhoods. In Chicago, high school students organized marches calling for investment in education instead of policing. In Atlanta, community leaders partnered with local businesses to fund mental health programs as alternatives to incarceration. And in Los Angeles, artists painted murals honoring victims of police brutality, turning city walls into canvases of remembrance and resistance. Sarah herself remained deeply involved in these efforts, traveling extensively to support grassroots initiatives and share strategies for sustainable reform. She often joked that she lived out of a suitcase, hopping from one city to another to speak at rallies, lead workshops, and meet with organizers. Despite her busy schedule, she always made time for personal connections, listening to stories, offering advice, and reminding people that their voices mattered. Her humility endeared her to many, earning her trust even among skeptics initially wary of outsiders coming in to fix things. One of her most impactful projects was the creation of the Equity Justice Network, a coalition of activists, lawyers, academics, and policymakers dedicated to dismantling systemic racism in all its forms. Through this network, Sarah facilitated collaboration between groups working on seemingly disparate issues, from environmental justice to healthcare access to criminal justice reform, highlighting how interconnected these struggles truly were. Monthly webinars brought together experts to discuss innovative solutions, while an online platform allowed members to share resources and coordinate campaigns. Within 2 years, the network boasted over 50,000 active participants, making it one of the largest grassroots organizations in the country. As her influence grew, so did the backlash. Critics accused Sarah of being too radical, claiming her calls for defunding police and reallocating resources amounted to abandoning public safety altogether. Some conservative media outlets launched smear campaigns, painting her as anti-law enforcement and exaggerating her stance to stoke fear among viewers. Anonymous threats persisted, forcing her security team to remain vigilant. Yet, Sarah refused to let negativity derail her mission. "They can twist my words all they want," she said during a televised interview. "But what I'm fighting for is simple: fairness, dignity, and respect for every human being." Her unwavering commitment earned her numerous accolades, including prestigious awards like the Nobel Peace Prize nomination and Time magazine's Person of the Year. While she appreciated the recognition, Sarah insisted that the true heroes were the countless individuals risking everything to challenge oppressive systems daily. "I'm just one person," she humbly told reporters. "This movement belongs to everyone who believes in a better future." By the 5th anniversary of the trial, tangible improvements began emerging. Studies showed a significant decline in complaints of excessive force following the implementation of de-escalation training programs. Cities that invested in social services rather than expanding police budgets reported lower crime rates and stronger community ties. Young people, inspired by Sarah's example, entered fields like law, politics, and education, determined to create lasting change from within institutions. Still, Sarah knew there was more work to be done. Systemic racism and inequality weren't problems that could be solved overnight. They required constant vigilance and adaptation. To ensure sustained momentum, she established the Future Leaders Fellowship, a program designed to mentor young activists and equip them with the skills needed to navigate complex political landscapes. Fellows received training in advocacy, policy development, and grassroots organizing, preparing them to carry the torch forward. On a personal level, Sarah found solace in small moments of joy amidst the chaos. She reconnected with old friends, took up painting as a hobby, and spent weekends hiking in nearby mountains to clear her mind. Love also found its way back into her life when she met Alex Carter, a journalist covering social justice issues. Their shared passion for equity forged a deep bond, and soon they became inseparable partners both personally and professionally. Looking back on her journey, Sarah marveled at how far she'd come since that terrifying night years ago. What started as a harrowing encounter had evolved into a lifelong crusade for justice, a testament to the transformative power of courage and collective action. She often reflected on the faces of those who had joined her along the way. The mother, whose son had been wrongfully arrested, the retired cop advocating for reform, the teenager dreaming of a fairer world. Each person reminded her why she kept going, even when the road ahead seemed impossibly steep. In her final speech before stepping down as president of the Human Rights Council, Sarah addressed a packed auditorium filled with supporters, allies, and fellow dreamers. "When I first stood here 5 years ago," she began, her voice steady yet filled with emotion, "I never imagined we'd achieve so much. But none of this would have been possible without you, without your courage, your resilience, your unyielding belief in a better tomorrow." She paused, scanning the room as applause erupted. "We've proven that no obstacle is insurmountable when we stand together, that no system is too entrenched to dismantle if we refuse to give up, and that no dream is too big if we dare to fight for it." As she stepped away from the podium, tears streaming down her face, the audience rose to their feet, cheering and chanting her name. It wasn't just gratitude. They were celebrating the ripple effect of her courage, the countless lives touched by her determination, and the enduring legacy of a movement rooted in love and justice. And so, Sarah Thompson walked off stage, ready to embrace whatever came next. Though her role might have changed, her purpose remained the same: to build a world where everyone could live free from fear, oppression, and injustice. For Sarah, the fight was never about glory. It was about hope. And as long as there were people willing to dream and act, that hope would continue to shine brightly, lighting the path toward a brighter, fairer future.